319, 319.
Lamentation chapter 3 has a beautiful, beautiful statement in the middle of a really difficult book with a lot of sadness and pathos. The Lord's loving kindness indeed never ceases. His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, and therefore I will hope in him. It's new. It's a new morning. It's a beautiful day. Driving over here from Tampa, it was just beautiful. I was looking at the sun coming up, and I was looking at all the taillights in front of me lighting up on I-4 like red ants going down the interstate, all lit. And looking forward to being with you. I was thinking about what we were going to talk about this morning, and really glad to have an opportunity to speak about my favorite section of the New Testament, the parable of the prodigal son. I just love this section of Scripture. I particularly love it because, as was William Faulkner, I believe it said, it is the greatest short story in the written language of humankind. And I've plumbed its depths over and over and over and over again, and I don't think I've come anywhere near the bottom of the well. I was looking this past week, and when I sent the message ahead, here are some things I can speak on. One of the sections was on the prodigal son, and I think there are 26 lessons in that series. It's not a series. Nobody wants 26 lessons in a row, but 26 different lessons that I through the years have preached on this, and I make a promise you won't hear the same thing twice. It is just that broad and that deep. It is an incredible story that offers us so much on so many different levels. And I'm really happy to be able to speak on that this morning. It was a great blessing for me to know that I would get to talk about Luke chapter 15. I'm going to get there eventually, but I want to start with this. If I were to ask you, and I'm not asking you to speak out loud, but I want you to just think about it. If I were to ask you, name some geniuses in the world. Geniuses in the world. And let's get rid of the softballs. Drop Brent Forsyth. Drop that one. Who would you think of? Again, not asking you to answer out loud, not putting you on the spot. Who would you think of? Geniuses in the world. And let me tell you who some of those typically are. I'm a sucker for lists. You know, what are the top 10 songs in pop culture? Who are the 10 most important people in Babylonian history? What are the 10 places people choose to go? I'm a sucker for those. And so I've seen books that say, and lists that say, these are considered to be the most intelligent people in the history of the world. Probably the one you came up with first, and you really probably don't know much about him, was Einstein. Am I right? Some of you thought about Einstein. You know, Einstein's an interesting character. You know what he looked like. God blessed him with great brains, but not much beauty. On one occasion, a beautiful Hollywood starlet came to Einstein and said, "Albert, we should get married." And he said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, just think, if we had children with my looks and your brains, imagine what we could produce." And Albert said, "Yeah, well, what if they got my looks and your brains?" Einstein, we think of. Oh, what about Sir Isaac Newton? The English mathematician, astronomer, theologian, author, naturalist, the man who invented gravity, no, discovered gravity. Or you may have thought of Leonardo da Vinci, painter, sculptor, architect, mathematician, engineer, inventor, anatomist, botanist, writer. You might have thought of Madame Marie Curie, who discovered radioactivity and was the discoverer of two of our elements, the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, and the only person in history to win two of them, for chemistry and physics. You may have thought of military genius Napoleon Bonaparte, military mastermind who conquered most of Europe and Russia. You may have thought music, Beethoven, composer despite being deaf. Or you might have thought of Mozart, the most prolific composer of his generation, who began touring Europe to perform at the age of 10. 10. Can you imagine a 10-year-old walking on a stage and getting ready, pulling up a piano stool and regaling audiences? You might have thought of Nikola Tesla. He invented alternate current electricity, the Tesla coil, wireless transmission of energy. If you're thinking modern people, you may have thought of somebody like Jordan Peterson, a man who's got a mental ability to take complex matters and make them understandable. And of course, this audience immediately thought of Brent Forsyth and his ability to present the gospel in unique ways. One thing I've noticed, and I've looked up these lists over and over again, highest IQs in history, smartest person in history, listing them, but there's one name that's not found on any list I've ever seen, ever. Jesus Christ. I've never seen him on a list. A few years ago, I ran across a book called The Surprising Genius of Jesus. That in itself drew my attention. The Surprising Genius of Jesus, What the Gospels Reveal About the Greatest Teacher. It was written by Peter Williams. The book fascinated me because of a couple of things. First of all, finally somebody was wanting to talk about Jesus being a genius. But the surprising genius was the interesting thing. And it was surprising when I read the book and contemplated what Williams was saying and why he considered Jesus to be a true genius. And much of what he said related to the parable of the prodigal son, which was a double blessing for me. So we might ask the question, well, why wouldn't Jesus be included in lists? I mean, why wouldn't people automatically say, well, number one genius in the history of the world has got to be Jesus? Because even among Christians, many of us might not consider him to be a genius because we know he's God. Well, of course he's God. He has an unfair advantage. He knows everything. But you'd be mistaken about that. Jesus didn't know absolutely everything because he was God. There were things revealed to him, and there were things that were even kept from him in his human form. But remember, he is human. He is both God and humanity, and if you're asking me to explain how that could be, any attempt on my part to explain how he could be both and how those two, creation of man and eternal existence of God, could be in one body and coexist, I'd give would only demean and minimize his incredible existence. But he was human. we might say, well, we wouldn't consider him a genius because, he never wrote anything that we have. He never composed anything. He never produced anything concrete. He never built a building like the Taj Mahal, or he never sculpted anything like La Pieta or David by Michelangelo. He never painted anything. He never produced something that's lasting like that. No military strategy, no political movement that we can attribute to him. But consider what he said. Just what he said. What he taught. So let me take just a couple of minutes to try to put you in the frame of mind to understand what is behind Luke chapter 15 and John chapter 15 that we began looking at last night and will continue to look at tonight and again tomorrow 3 times. You see, I'm prepared to talk to you today. I knew what the topic was going to be ahead of time. And even if your elders had said to me, Ralph, we want you to talk about this passage in Hosea chapter 2, verse 2, whatever that passage is. I haven't memorized that and don't even know what it says. I just pulled it out of the air. But if your elders had asked me to speak on that, I would have prepared to speak on that. I have notes in front of me. I've got an open Bible that I've looked at and will look at with you today. I've had time and I've had resources, I've had contemplation, and I've had study. None of those things were true for Jesus. None of those things. Jesus so often spoke off the cuff, responding to circumstances and people, to questions and surroundings and happenstance that occurred right there, and he addressed those things with incredible acuity. About the best way I could attempt to tell you how that worked for him would be this. I want you to imagine the elders said, Ralph, we want you to come over and we want you to speak for us. And we'd like to know what you want to speak about. What would you like to address? What's on your heart? And I said this. I said, well, I'd like to just kind of see what happens. So if you'll trust me, I just want you to, we'll just go with what happens. And so this morning, imagine, I left the house and Paula said, what are you going to talk about this morning? I said, I don't know yet. I'm not sure. And driving over here, just moments before I got here, the first of the planes in your air show went overhead, and they banked, and they were in an incredible formation, and I thought, that's it. That's going to be my sermon today. And I walked in here and walked up in the pulpit and said, let me tell you what just happened. This just happened. I saw these planes in this formation, and I would like to talk to you about 3 things I learned watching those planes go overhead. Now, you may say, you know, Ralph, I think you could do that. I think our preachers could do that. I think they could probably find something that's worthwhile saying. I'll grant that. That might happen. And sometimes for those of us, I know Kent's here, I know Mark's here, Brent's here, we all probably could say, there has been some time when something happened on the way to church. Maybe it was something like this, God forbid. You're on your way to services and you get a phone call and one of your members died. Just died suddenly. Just died. and you say, you know what? I can't go in there and talk about this morning why we should sing and be happy. So I think I'm just going to direct my remarks about this great brother who was a part of our congregation, who's now gone, and maybe how sudden death can occur and how we never know, and we always need to be prepared. We've all done that, haven't we? We've all done that at some point. But there's an element about this that goes beyond that. Because I know 3 preachers in this audience, have great respect for all 3 of them. But I doubt anything any of us said would be picked up by other preachers and proclaimed all over America. I really doubt, even if somebody got live streamed my remarks about the planes this morning, if I could come up with 3 things I learned from your air show this morning before I got here, if I could, I really doubt that Mark would go home and preach it in Seffner tomorrow, and that Kent would say, cancel my sermon tomorrow. I know what I'm preaching. I'm going to borrow Ralph's sermon. And Brent says, I can't preach that tomorrow because they already heard it. I don't think it would be that memorable, that incredible. But go further. It wouldn't just be other preachers heard it, were moved by it, and their audiences were moved by it. Can you imagine that lesson about the plains in Lakeland would be preached 10 years from now, 50 years from now? That 1,000 years from now, preachers would say, they used to have these things called airplanes. And I heard this sermon, or I read this sermon by this guy 1,000 years ago, and it is still so pertinent to us, so relevant, and so critical to us that I've got to preach it to you today. There isn't one of us that thinks that could happen. Not one. But that's what we're doing. We're taking the words of Jesus, preached over 1,000 years ago, and we're still saying it is not only relevant, it is critical to our lives. And remember, it came off the cuff. We're looking at John chapter 15. Do you know what John chapter 15 is in the context of? It's Jesus' last night with the disciples before he dies. It's not like a week before they said, hey, Lord, there's some people out here want to ask you some questions. He said, no, I don't have time for that. I'm preparing my sermons that I'm going to be giving to you guys the night before I die. The words he spoke in John chapter 15 came from his heart, not from the tedium of his study. They just flowed from him. And this one, Luke chapter 15, now let's start looking at the text. I want you to look, because there's a clue in this of how this came about. Verse 1 says, now all the tax collectors and the sinners were coming near him to listen to him. Both the Pharisees and the scribes began to grumble, saying, oh, this man receives sinners and he eats with them. Now look at verse 3. The sinners and the tax collectors are coming near. They're approaching him to hear what he has to say. And on the fringes of all that are the Pharisees. You see them? They got their hands crossed. Look at the rabble. Look at what this guy draws. Look at the people who come listen to him. Sinners, every one of them. Tax collectors, prostitutes, drunkards. the lowest of the low, the people we can't even associate with. And they're back there whispering to each other. And verse 3 begins, so he told them this parable. Jesus looked at the people that were coming close to hear him, and he looked on the fringes and saw the frowns and the furrowed brows and the head shaking of the Pharisees and the scribes, and he said, I got to talk about this. I got to address this. It was that quick, that quick. It wasn't even comparable to what I painted for you as I'm driving in. I see those planes, and unless you want to say, I was opening the door to come in, still not knowing what I was going to talk about, and the planes came roaring over, and I said, that's it, that's what I'm going to preach on. And I get up here and speak, unless it's that spontaneous, it doesn't match what Jesus did. He looked at the crowd, and he said, I know what I want to say. And often the parables of Jesus are clearly indicative of something happening around him. You remember the first word of the parable of the seeds and the sower? It's what? Behold. What are they looking at? Behold. He's outside. Behold. A sower went forth to sow. I want to tell you, everything about that passage says to me, he pointed to a guy in a field, said, look, just like I might draw your attention at the beginning of a sermon by hitting a PowerPoint slide, and there's a guy out there throwing seed, and I say, behold, you look at that. But I did it prepared. If I did it, it was because I found the slide and I sent it ahead and we put it on the overhead projector so that everybody could see it at the moment I wanted. What Jesus did is, behold, a sower went forth to sow. And then he tells this parable that, again, I'm not just keying on the preachers in this audience, because some of you are teachers, not preachers. And every teacher and preacher that's done any work at all has talked about those things, haven't we? We've all talked about that parable more than once in great detail. So Jesus is not an ordinary teacher with brilliant students who credited him with their great ideas. That's not the case. You know, sometimes teachers are vaunted by their students unfairly. Oh, he was the best teacher I ever had. Well, no, that's not really the case. You were the best student that teacher ever had. You're not the result of that teacher's skill. You are what you are, but that teacher didn't get in the way. That's not the case here. Jesus does not have an incredible discipleship of all geniuses, and he's unfairly credited with what he produced in them. Nor is he a smart teacher with really smart pupils. It's not, well, they got each other and it was a perfect storm and it was a wonderful thing where a really good teacher got with some really good students and they created an incredible apostleship and church. That's not it. We know that because we preached about those disciples, haven't we? We know how sometimes they missed the point. We know how sometimes they went astray. We know how sometimes they demonstrated their weaknesses. We know that because they admitted it. Now, what we have is a genius. He's a genius. And whatever depth and brilliance his disciples showed is just a reflection, a mere reflection of his genius. So we're in Luke 15. And there are three parables or stories that Jesus told to remember it relates to this audience. These people who, in the eyes of the righteous, don't deserve Jesus' attention. And this audience of righteous people who disdain what Jesus is trying to do for people who don't deserve his attention. He's addressing both crowds simultaneously. He's giving those who are without hope, and he is taking the hope those who believe they have it all together, taking that from them and making them realize you've missed the point. And he does that with a series of three stories: a lost sheep, a lost coin, and a lost boy. And all three of these parables were meant to address those two disparate groups of people listening to him. Are you still with me? That's what he's trying to do. The last words of Luke 14 is this: he who has ears to hear, let him hear. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Does that seem a redundancy to you? Of course we have ears to hear. That's what they're for. But Jesus is saying, so why don't you try to listen? Listen. Hear what I have to say, because you're not going to want to do that. Some of you are standing on the edges, you're in the perimeter, you're on the outside, and you're just shaking your head. You're not ready to hear. Let him who has ears to hear, hear. And then he begins the parable. To who? The non-devout. The non-devout, the outsiders. And look at the beauty of this. Where are the outsiders? They're near. The outsiders are inside. And what about the insiders? They're out. They're on the edges. They're not right up front. They're not down here. They're not right here saying, oh, talk to us. We are so excited you're here. That's not where they are. No. In the context of this building, you know where they are? They're not even back there where Don is. They're peeking in the windows. Shh, wait, did you hear what he just said? They don't want to be in here. They don't want to be close. And Jesus is talking to them. You got ears? Listen. Listen to what I'm saying. Who's come to criticize and to judge? The devout. They're not hearers. They're knee-jerk reactionaries. They've already judged Jesus and the crowd. They've already judged him. They're not ready to listen to what he has to say. And the parable that shows his incredible genius is actually the third of a three-part lesson. All of them are tied, all three of these parables are tied by a common theme. And this story is the culmination of Jesus' message that day. The parable of the prodigal is the ultimate expression of what Jesus wants to say that day. Lost sheep, lost coin, lost son. This is entitled, in my Bible, The Prodigal Son. Is it in yours? Does it call it that? The parable of the prodigal son. But that's really misnamed. Because Jesus is very clear. Look, he could have told this story this way. And he said, verse 11, a man had a son. A man had a son. Now imagine how that story would have gone if there had only been one son. Now we say, oh, how tragic. I mean, how tragic. The man only had one son and he went astray. So now he's got nothing. He doesn't have anybody in his family at all left. That'd be sad, wouldn't it? But that's not what the story says. A man had two sons. And now look, this is a Jewish audience. This is a Jewish audience. Have they heard that pattern, that motif before? Oh, they have heard it over and over and over again. This is familiar territory. When we talk about Adam and Eve, who do we talk about? Cain and Abel. When we talk about Abraham, who do we talk about? Ishmael and Isaac. When we talk about the sons of Isaac, who are they? Esau and Jacob. A man had two sons. They're locked in. They've heard this before. And in all three of those cases, what do we have? A younger son and an older son. And in these cases, the older son is being cast out. Do you ever think about that? Abel, the younger son, is righteous. The older son is thrown away. Ishmael is cast out and Isaac replaces him. Esau is cast out and Jacob replaces him. You could go further even, and although there are many more sons, the motif is still there. Joseph is spared as the younger, and the older, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, they're cast out. Now, the Pharisees and the scribes see themselves as the favored child. They're the righteous. They're like the Pharisee and the tax collector who went up into the temple to pray. And the Pharisee said, I'm thankful I'm not like these other people. I'm what? I'm the firstborn. He doesn't say that, but that's his position as he sees himself. So when Jesus begins, a man had two sons, you and I need to know he is setting up the Pharisees and the scribes. He is setting them up. A man had two sons, and the younger son said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that belongs to me. And he leaves, squanders, and dies. And the Pharisees see him in these people, these rabble, these people who've squandered the opportunity to be what God wanted them to be. But you need to understand something. This parable is 388 words long in the original Greek. I don't know Greek. I know a little Greek. He runs a restaurant down the street from where we live. But I don't know that language, but I've understood there are 388 words, but these 388 words are incredible. Every word has weight. There's not a single time where in this parable Jesus would have said, oh, no, wait, I got that mixed up. I'm sorry, it was the older son. I meant to say, I forgot to tell you about the older son. Oh, let me go back and start over. The genius is speaking. And he tells us about this younger son. But you need to know that in this story, only 60% of the entire parable concerns the prodigal son. A full 40% focuses on the older son. The prodigal, really, it's almost half. It's almost half and half. We call it the parable of the prodigal son, maybe because that story is resolved. But the story of the older son is left open. Do you know what happened to the older son? I don't. I don't. Do you know what happened to the Pharisees and scribes who were in the windows hearing Jesus? I don't. My guess is the sinners and tax collectors loved this story and responded to it. We just don't know about those others. 3 times this story proclaims he was dead and is alive. 3 times. Not exactly those words every time, but they're presented that way. The first time, this younger son thinks he's dead and he knows how to live. At the beginning, if you were to ask him, let's talk to him. He's sitting in the house. And we say, hey, what's your life like? What are you doing? He says, man, this is a dead end. I mean, I got nothing here. I got nothing. This is terrible. I'll tell you what I wish. Can I confide in you? I wish my dad would die. And then I'd get the inheritance. And I could go do what I want to do. Because there's some cruises I've always wanted to take. And there are some places on my bucket list I want to see. And I would love it if I didn't have the confines of this place and the restrictions that are on me. What I want to do is I want to live, capital L, live. I want it my way. Put on Frank Sinatra one more time. I did it my way. That's what I wish I could do. That's what I want. So where are you now, young man? I'm dead. I'm dead. I got nothing. But I know what I would do to live if I could. You see that in the story? You see that? That's exactly where he is. I'm dead, but I know how to be alive. And then he gets that granted. Boy, aren't you glad God doesn't answer every prayer you've offered with a yes? Aren't you glad? That there are things I know now, if God had given me, my life would be miserable. But this prodigal got what he wanted. Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. So he divided his wealth between them. Father gave him what he wanted. And then it says, not many days later. I mean, he's already gotten this plan. It's not like, oh my, what'll I do now? Well, 6 months down the road, I'll do. He's already packed his bags. He's good to go. He knows what to do. He's already got all the brochures of where he wants to be. He is going to Las Vegas, and he's going to catch a cruise ship, and he's going to really, really live. He gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country, And then look at the brilliance of Jesus' summary. There, he squandered his estate with loose living. Loose living. I would use the expression now from this point on, he is a loose liver, but you would think it has to do with the organ in his body, and it doesn't. He is loosely living his life. What does that mean? He has no restrictions. He has no confines. He has no boundaries. He has no filters. Anything goes. His brother will say of him, and I'm not sure it's totally accurate, but it certainly has some substance. When this your son who has wasted or devoured your wealth with prostitutes. I mean, he has become incredibly sexually promiscuous, but my guess is he's become free with alcohol. And if he were in our culture today, recreational marijuana would be the action of every morning, every day. He gambles. He squanders. He drinks. He's promiscuous with women. His language has become corrupt. And he has nothing to prevent him from being what he wants to be. He was dead and he's alive. And then he realizes, I'm dead, but I know how I can be alive again. It says, when he came to his senses, from what? Verse 16, he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him. So where are you now, young man? Where are you? Where are you in that passage? Well, you know what? If I could summarize it, I'm dead in the water. I'm dead. I got nothing. I got no way forward because I have no resources. I have no plans because I can't implement them. And I'm on the verge of death. I'm literally on the verge of death. I have no food. I got no clothing except what's on my back. And I mean, it's a bad life. I am homeless and without any hope whatsoever. What are you? Well, for all practical purposes, I'm dead. So is there any way you could live again? Well, yeah. I will get up and go to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Just make me a hired man, a hireling. The word hireling here is not even household slave. It's a temp. It's the idea of being a temp. Look, there's nothing contemptible about being a temporary employee. But you know, being a temp means you have no firm connections for the future. Look, I'm not even worthy to be a slave. I'm not even asking to come back in the house. I just want a job. Just give me a job. Why? So I can have food. So I can put food in my belly. So I can put clothes on my back. So I can get cleaned up. I'm dead. I want to live. And then the third time, it's in the words of the Father. And the first time, what I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, in reality. The Father says to the older son, this your brother was dead, and he's alive. He was lost, and he's been found. May I paraphrase it? How could we not party? This story has three elements. Preachers love threes. You know, we love threes. I have 3 points for you. We tell the congregation that so they'll get excited. They'll know when you say, and point number 3, they can all put their shoes on, wake up the person next to them, and get ready to go home. We love threes. This is 3 parables, and the third parable has really 3 elements. A boy who was dead at home and knew how to be alive. A boy who was away and dead and knew how he could be alive. And the third part, a boy who came home and was alive again. Was made alive again. And the first 2 acts in this series of 3 set up the third one. They're much quicker. In the first parable, Jesus tells very quickly, again, remember, it's off the cuff. He says there was a sheep that got lost by going away. I mean, he doesn't say it that way, but that's how the sheep got lost. This sheep didn't get lost because the shepherd pulled in 99 of them and just left the other one out there. This was a sheep who wandered off. When we sometimes sing that beautifully worded, maybe not so beautifully sung, but beautifully worded song, the 90 and 9, it's a great story of this sheep, and they're all gathered and they're all being fed, and one of them is on the hill far away. How did he get that way? Well, he just kind of wandered over here, and oh, this looks good to eat. And, oh, wow, look at that. That looks good. And then, oh, down here, over this looks good. And then down, oh, that looks good. And while all the other sheep are up here, this discontented sheep wanders off. Lost. And in the second parable, the coin is lost at home. It never goes far. The coin's inanimate, so it doesn't wander off, doesn't try to hide. It's not doing anything through any fault of its own, but it's lost at home. And the subtle indication in the third parable is that the younger son does what the sheep does. He wanders off. But the older son is lost at home. What he thinks is his comfort, I'm at home. You can't get lost at home, becomes his demise. There are 2 sons lost in the story. That's the very lesson Jesus wants to convey to his audience. In the first part, he wants to talk to the people that are down front. Let me tell you what you people are like. You're wandering off because you think you've found life somewhere else. In your money, you tax collectors, or in your prostitution. You're living terrible lives. You need to come home, you're dead. But then, and while the people on the fringes are saying, give it to them, amen, go. You go, Jesus. He says, well, let me tell you about the older son. Oh, and he turns his eyes on them. The older son, oh yeah, the one who stayed at home, they're saying, stayed at home. He says, let me tell you about him. And then he just rips open and exposes their hearts. Their hearts. Oh, you are so secure. You feel you've got it all and you haven't been recognized properly. Jesus smokes both of them and offers the same solution. You both need to come to the Father. There are a couple of other things, and then I'm done, really. In the first parable, it's 1 in 100 sheep. That's 1%. In the second parable, it's 1 in 10 coins. That's 10%. Yeah, the sheep, yeah, sometimes that happens, but not very often. And 1 in 10 coins being lost, yeah, I can see that happens, but I mean, it doesn't happen that often. But in the last parable, it's 100% loss. Both boys are lost until they come home. And we know the one comes home, but we never know the conclusion of the older son. The beauty of the genius of Jesus is not shown just by his miracles or his character, but by his incredible mind. When you're reading the things of Jesus, I hope you never forget the things we've talked about today. These are not prepared sermons, the best of Jesus, hip pocket lessons he carries in his robe, so if he's ever asked to speak, he can pull it out. These come from his heart and his character and his mind, and 1,000 years from when he spoke them, we are still stunned at how relevant and how acutely proper everything Jesus said is. And my guess is, if the world is still here in 3026, preachers will mount pulpits like this and say, let me tell you about the genius of Jesus. Because the only thing I can conclude with are the words of those temple soldiers who came back to the scribes and the Pharisees and the temple priests and said in John chapter 7, verse 46, never has a man spoken like this. If brilliant teachers have moved you in your life, and I've had several of those, I've been blessed to have several teachers, as we all probably have, who taught us incredible things, maybe about math or science or English or history. Or do not ignore the master teacher, Jesus the Christ. He calls you to come home. Are you dead in your sins and trespasses? Ephesians tells us he can make you alive again. He can bury your sins in the waters of this baptistry, and you can rise to walk a new life. And this group today will say, this person was lost and has been found. This person was dead and is alive again. That can be yours today. And if you're the older brother and you are looking at others and saying, I am so thankful, I'm not like these other people Ralph's been talking about, be careful. You may be left out of God's celebration if you don't recognize that you can be lost at home. You can be the 1 in 10 coins lost, and you need God's rescue. Can we help you? If so, come to the front while we stand and sing this song.
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus say, come unto me, I am the way. Hearken the loving call I come to thee. Only a step, come, for he bled for you and I. He's the same loving Savior yet, Jesus the crucified.
Thank you all for being here this morning. I know there's a lot of things you could be doing on a Saturday morning, like an air show, and you have taken the time to be here and to study the Word of God. And